Hey, everybody. Welcome to celebrating the brand ambassador. Today, I had the pleasure of interviewing Rockey from Rockey's Liqueur, somebody I've known in the industry for a long time, and Jackson Cannon, the legendary Jackson Cannon of Boston, who is one of the, to me, I think you were one of the people who put Boston cocktail scene on the map, and definitely always made it home for me at the legendary Eastern Standard. Welcome, gentlemen.
Great to be here.
You're very, very welcome. So today we're going to start off, and I like to do the show in two parts where, we're going to talk a little bit of, everybody can hear a little bit of your backstory, because I've known you guys for about 20 years, 15 something years. And I learned a lot of new things about the both of you by having our pre-conversation. So I think a lot of people would find it really interesting. So I'm going to ask you guys both the same, because you both have an influence from your parents, how you got into this industry. So, and Jackson, I'll start off with you. Can you tell me a little bit about your upbringing and how it influenced your entry into the hospitality industry, and about your career path that's led you to where you are now?
Yeah, so I've told many jokes about how I've turned a potential issue into a budding career. That's the famous old joke for those of us who enjoy, when we're heavy drinking something really special. But I came up in a house of writers. My father's a presidential historian and journalist, still active, working on his memoirs in his 80s. And my oldest brother, who's 12 years older than me, also went into that business and is an acclaimed presidential historian and author, actively editing and managing the Washington bureau for a website called realclearpolitics.com. And so it was kind of interesting for me, like growing up, there was the exposure to ritual drinking, I guess, and in a way that I think most of us get our start in family context that way. When there was like a toast going around the table, even when you were really young, you might get a tiny shot glass of beer. Not really as common, I guess, in the States as it sort of is in Europe to kind of expose kids to alcohol, but we were exposed to it young. My father liked gimlets and kind of taught me how to put them together. I mean, when I was like 8, I could make his, which was sort of a 50-50 gin and Rose's lime juice, and mine would be like 100% lime juice, but we both liked it better with a fresh wedge of lime squeezed in, right? So
nice, classy even back then.
And there was also kind of sort of Hemingway as a 20th century iconic author who was a journalist first, right? Sort of loomed as this presence in writing. And I think I was first exposed to like a classic cocktail, the Jack Rose, when Jake Barnes is ducking out to have them in The Sun Also Rises as an expatriate in those Paris cafes. So there was a lot of context for me growing up to celebratory drinking. There was a context to it as narrative in sort of the American arts, if you will. And that kind of lay dormant for me as I became an adult. I played music as my first career, and it was sort of, towards the backside of 15, 20 years, pounding it out in clubs and bars and sometimes getting to a larger venue, that I was captivated by kind of bartending itself and the bar operation. And it's not a joke. It's not hyperbole for me to say, when I do tell people I found a way to spend more times in bars than when I was a bass player, I realized that was really kind of, that was why I was playing music, was at that intersection of people coming together over drinks and celebrating occasions. And a lot of people I know who went into second careers for music, always longed for their playing days, and I didn't. I would hold a menu of great drinks. I would get through a 12 or 14-hour service, and people would ask me like, "Hey, do you miss playing?" I'd be like, "No, this is music for me now." So I think being raised among like kind of journey, that career of a journeyman author, who's spanning like hard work into a creative pursuit, coupled with kind of like, it opened the door for me to play music, but also opened the door for me to come out of that and really become more of a bar operator. So that's really how I got into it.
Do you still play at all? Do you still play?
Very little. So I have kids, and when they were little, they'd dust off the upright and break out the tambourine and jam around a little bit, and still do that. They can play a little, and sometimes we feel like from a social thing like doing it, but I don't miss getting I never think about getting my chops back to the point where I could thump for a couple of hours. I hear music and I love it, and it's just very rare that I get that whiff of that nostalgic feeling of like, oh, this piece of music makes me wish I was playing it. I just don't feel that way anymore. So
that's fair enough. You outgrow things. I don't like playing softball anymore.
I feel kind of lucky. I feel lucky, like, because I would have just kept doing it if I had to. That's a lot of musicians. That's kind of where you are, and I was there for 20 years. So, but now I have to do this. So
you have to do this. Well, tell us a little bit about your, well, I guess we can go. We'll talk about. Sorry, Rocky. Will tell you about your.
Let's find out Rocky's early stuff, and we can come back.
Yeah, early stuff, and then we'll jump back in. I think that's a great idea.
Well, mine's very short and sweet. It's always so fun being on podcasts or webinars or sessions, having conversations with folks like you, Jackson, and of course Elaine as well, because I really don't know how to do anything except make booze, and I'm a one-hit wonder, and virtually illiterate.
I find that very hard. He's being very humble right now.
Yeah, can't play music. Haven't played music since high school. Yeah, it's and that was the recorder, the like sort of basic flute. It's just a disaster, man. But good or bad, I do have an origin story, I guess. My folks actually didn't drink at all. Mine
either.
Yeah, right. My dad quit drinking more or less when I was born. I think because I was born, the best accounts are that he overdid it when he was younger. So I think to his credit, he wanted to cut that out of his life, not have it be an issue, and did not drink at all. And hasn't my entire life. My mother actually has a beer every once in a while, but I think, kind of as a commitment to their marriage, also doesn't drink. They're retired now. They were cooking whenever I was a kid. They were both chefs. They met in kitchens, and they started to sort of integrate me into that world as I got older. And I had a real interest in it because I looked up to both my folks. My mother made every one of my birthday cakes when I was a kid and was a professional pastry chef. My dad was a professional chef on the savory side as well. So I kind of wet my feet in the industry on the culinary side. And I think I've said to Elaine before that, I still have this fantasy of going back to the kitchen at some point in my life. Hopefully whenever it's not, my livelihood depending on it, and it can just be fun. Cooking has always been my therapy. I am happier when I get to cook a few things for friends or for myself, at home every once in a while. So when I graduated from culinary school at the CIA, I thought I'd move to New York, spend some time cooking there, and then off to the races, open a restaurant. The rest would sort of be fine dining and Michelin stars and notoriety, blah, blah, blah. And I figured before I take that path, before I jump into that world, I'll take a couple of years off of it and learn service and learn beverage. And I'd relatively recently read Setting the Table by Danny Meyer. And I figured if I'm going to learn about service and hospitality, and all the things that go along with it, wine and spirits and beer, et cetera, then I should learn from him. So I went to 11 Madison Park back in 2007. I was 20 or 21, maybe barely 21 at the time. And I didn't ever go back to cooking. I started to see the beauty and exciting sort of possibilities of being a part of a service team. And when Will, then the GM of 11 Madison Park, obviously went on to be the owner at some point, he came up to me and was like, "Look, man, I know you came from the kitchen. We're looking to build out the bar. Would you want to join the bar team here?" And I jumped at the opportunity. That's the first time I ever made a drink. The team there was so much fun. Elaine, you'll probably remember, and maybe Jackson as well. Corey Hill was the head bartender at the time. And we had this great team. Leo and I were bartending and often butting heads at that point in our careers, both coming up. I sort of fell in love with it because for me, the style of bartending that I developed and certainly what led me to produce Rocky's at some point, was that I have a fundamental understanding of how to create something and cook something, really cook something, right? So being able to make my way around a kitchen with confidence led me to being able to make my way around a bar with confidence, create cocktails with confidence. And I'm really indebted to my folks to put me on the path to cook and really to bring that to the bar. And, I always sort of bristle a little bit, when people talk about, sort of bar chefing, because that's not what I'm saying. I think, that's a different craft, because that's not my area of expertise. But, creating cocktails with an eye toward preparing things in house and sort of a culinary technique that enables you to be more creative behind the bar. That's my background.
I love that. It's such a great way, and you definitely always look at. I know you don't like call it a bar chef, but you always did have a culinary
Sure.
in the drinks I had from aspect to your cocktails. Now, Jackson, I know you have a different story of how you kind of got into the craft cocktail world, and I love this again, and I'm very excited because one of the people that I know you're going to talk about, Brother Cleve, is opening up a bar here in New York City. So. And I love that story you told me about the themes. So can you tell us a little bit about Misty and you and Brother Cleve and how that?
Yeah, absolutely. And Brother Cleve opening a bar in New York is really exciting for everybody who knows him. Cocktail historian, kind of musicologist, as well as a musician. Cleve likes to go deep in whatever he is interested in, right? And has his whole life. So, if you have any questions about Bollywood or like another subgenre of music from across the world, like he often is your guy. He knows as much about tiki as anybody who's only studied tiki, if you will, but he hasn't only studied tiki. He knows the history of American diners, how that intersects.
Oh, wow.
Menu and bar culture. I mean, he is just a rich fountain of, just kind of adoring culture, right? And his appetite for like better drinking is something that had a huge influence on Misty. And she calls him her mentor. I sort of like, maybe I didn't get quite the direct training from him that Misty did. They had a weekly event at a club that I helped book called the Lizard Lounge that was called Saturnalia, and it was Thursday nights. And this is a really interesting time in kind of Boston scene. Elaine, you and I spoke about it briefly. This was just kind of in the post-Swingers, the movie era, and like the kind of swing dance craze had sort of swept, and it had come and gone in New York pretty quickly. In San Francisco, it stayed for like a decade. It was, I mean, at the time that craft cocktail bars are starting to emerge in San Francisco, it's still there, which was kind of fascinating.
I think because the movie was based there, like, the Swingers movie, and people kind of look for that hidden bar.
Well, that's probably a story for another day, but there's a rich jazz community there. There's a lot of people who went to school for jazz in the East, like went there because lifestyle was just that much better. I mean, San Francisco has changed so much in the last 15, 20 years, but in that late 90s period, the rent thing was hard, but it wasn't like it is now. And so there was a still like cross section of boheme and music and drink and whatever. But to get back to that kind of in Boston, that post Swingers, the movie, there were a lot of like hip rockers who sort of on the side wanted to go out and have like a vodka or gin martini, right? And it's really pre-craft cocktail, but there's like this martini Manhattan. Hey, can I make you a cocktail? Olives or cherries? This sort of return to a Brat Pack kind of vibe, right? That was palpable. I remember one band, Expanding Man, they were signed to a major label. They had a side project called the Sex Foxes, and it was like women wear dresses, men, wear suits, or it's like men don't be a dick, wear a suit. But it was like very like all in all, it was like an alternative to their alternative music, right?
Ways of being.
And Saturnalia was like a little hub in this cross current, and Cleve would bring in a drink of the week. And of course, he had the band Combustible Edison. there's a cocktail that's sort of post mid-Americana, pre-cocktail revolution. Can't be called a modern classic, but it's basically like a Chambord margarita that you can light on fire. And
Bring
they
that
would,
back.
right?
Exactly. That sounds like fun.
They would like, and they would show up. This is the height of grunge, and like Combustible Edison would show up to a gig in like shiny ties and a Valise bar and open it up on stage and be like shaking cocktails and half live, half DJ lounge music. I mean, it was way out of time, you know. Like, I'm not sure if it was older or newer or both, but it was really kind of a new thing. And Saturnalia played on that. Cleve as a DJ was mining sort of a rich cross connect between older jazz and what would become kind of modern lounge music, all the while like with these classic cocktails coming once a week. And Misty served first and bartended second there, and so kind of cut her teeth learning those drinks. And one of the things that in that period I remember so fondly was after Cleve had gone down and done music with Esquivel in Mexico. He'd done this like crazy side project and Kiss the Ring and all this crazy stuff. And he came back and he asked Misty and I if he could serve us tequila. And I think I literally was like, yeah, this shot of tequila. He's like, no, I want to serve you tequila. And it was the first time I'd been sat down for the ritual, the salts, the sangrita, the fruits, the fine big bottle, which we polished off in slow drinking rounds, you know? And so like that kind of, for me, was that awakening, right? Like seeing how Cleve was treating that material, how Misty was treating it, like I got swept up and it connected the worlds for me. And I sort of was like, I need to do this. I'm a little old to jump, you know. I'm not starting in a business, you know, at that young age, but I embraced it and I wanted to learn everything I could about it. B-Side Lounge, of course, was open at that time, and Misty bartended there, and Brother Cleve did too, and Pat Sullivan, and they really kind of sort of launched the scene. And sitting at that bar is where I met John Gertzen, who did the Number 9 Park programs later, and then Drink. And so that's really the kind of the root of it in the Boston scene for me, and what made me want to go. You know, as a musician, I'd always have part-time jobs, so that's how it started first. I'd play music, and then I'd have a little part-time job, and it became the bar job in my late 30s, and just kept pulling me in from there more and more.
And when did you go into Eastern Standard?
So we opened in 2005. I turned 40 that year, and I was the opening bar manager, and but I was like inexperienced in the restaurant business. You know, I had done, you know, I'd worked garde manger at a health club once. I worked an overnight diner. I'd done some bartending in another place, but it had all been like kind of a hodgepodge. And Garrett Harker, the proprietor, he just saw something in the storytelling. I think he thought we could do it. I was just dumb enough to know that you couldn't do fresh juice and cool cocktails at that volume, that nobody did it because it couldn't be done. I didn't know that. So we did it. But it was painful. The first year was it was a steep learning curve. And still, you know, we didn't really innovate our way out of it. We just sort of plowed away at it. And I remember when Wondrich wrote a little blurb about us for Esquire's Best Bars in like our second year or something like that. He said something about they're making a really good hanky-panky. They're making really good hanky-pankies by the bucket load. And that just, I felt pride in that, which I've never let go of. I like that we're known for great things at volume. That's our swagger. I think it played into maybe not going into the most experimental places all the time. And I kind of ended up defining myself as a bit more of a classics guy, but there's just so much territory in that. And Rocky can tell you, you know, just the changing some of the methodology on a syrup to be less like 19th century barman and a little bit more, you know, enlightened,
je ne sais quoi,
back of the house of the 20th century, you know, can go a long way to, you know, creating drinks that are solidly on that foundation of classics, but operating in a new way to spark people's appetites and interests. And And so, we did plenty of that. We felt like Eastern Standard sort of had to be an ever expanding program. As a result, we got, the restaurant itself was sort of big tent hospitality. It could be a different thing. Like if you went and polled our guests now, a college student would say, "Oh, it's the place that I go when my friends' parents are buying," and you could poll some young professional to be like, "It's the place I go 3 nights a week," and somebody else, it's like, "We've celebrated every one of our anniversaries here," and like they describe it in different ways, but they'd be dogmatic and emphatic that that's what it is.
Yeah.
It's not whatever you think, it's what I think. And so we were conscious to try and be something like that. And so even though it got us in a little bit to all areas, it kept us from going kind of too far into any one thing.
No, I mean, somebody who's been there quite a few times, had the pleasure of it, just watching it in operation Rocky, if you've never had the pleasure, it was inside the Hawthorne Hotel, and it was something of mystifying to watch the speed in which drinks could come out, but also the quality level. And there would be so many different groups there, in different styles. You could definitely see that they were experiencing. Everybody had their own little mini experience. And
when the news broke that we were permanently closing in the location where we'd almost done 15 years, AOC tweeted, "Say it ain't so," and I'm like, "Oh shit, yeah, they went to BU." Like, oh yeah, she knew how to use this place.
Bartender too, right?
That's what I'm told. Not a personal friend, but we'll be welcomed with open arms at the new Eastern Standard when we get it online in 2023. So
extremely exciting. Can't wait.
Very exciting about that, and we're definitely going to talk about that, what it's like to relaunch. And Jackson, you brought back a lot of memories, and thank you for sharing that story. But I love hearing stories about Misty, and she told her own about her brother Cleve's story. I had her on the show, and it was just just seeing the impact that he's had. I almost feel I'm very grateful he's going to be in New York. I feel like we can like claim him as our own. I'm sure he'll be missed. Yeah.
On the menu?
Boston people are not going to be happy. What did you say, Rocky?
Will the hanky panky be on the menu?
Who knows? I don't know.
Oh, wait.
At your place, Jackson.
At EST, we'll talk about that a little bit, but
okay.
We don't have to go down that rabbit hole, but to reopen something that was so many things to so many people, we're fortunate to be in the same neighborhood. We're going to have a similar footprint. We get to plan for a little bit more from an infrastructure space than we did because we didn't know what we were going to be. Having said that, if it's sort of Big Bang Theory, like I think that universe expanded as far as it could go. I think, the creative process for me now is to figure out in what ways can we constrict and focus and stay true without like looking for new areas. It's about, just sort of being back in that space with the kind of refinement that a 2-year break I think should bring. And we'll be a brand new restaurant where the stakes are 15 years high. It's going to be weird, so we started with 6 drinks on that cocktail menu. It got up to 100,
Things are,
and you don't want to fetishize that, right? So you don't want to like open up with the same 6 drinks you did in 2005 either, right? So you have to figure that out, and that's the process. It's going to take some time, but I'm excited to be in it.
Yeah, we're definitely going to expand on that, but I want to jump into, so Rocky, so many people, as I said, the show's going to talk about 2 things because you are a brand owner now and you also worked as a beverage director. So you have lots of different experiences, but a lot of people dream about owning their own product. I don't, but because I know what the work that goes into it. But
somebody who does.
Yeah, Mr. Duff definitely does. So tell us what your product is and why you chose, because you chose something quite interesting, and then a little bit about the experiencing of launching your own brand that most people don't realize, what it takes.
I certainly did not. And like with any new project, you go into it hopefully for the first time with a lot of optimism, some degree of confidence, and a lack of awareness of what you don't know, so you don't know not to do it, right? In the same way that Jackson was talking about the citrus, it's just like, oh, we didn't know that wasn't possible, so we just went ahead and did it, right? And that's, I think, how a lot of progress happens in our industry. So right, I was in restaurants and bars for a long time, about 15 years, and got pretty good, I think, at openings. I did 4 of them, and I felt as though I'd made enough stuff, liqueurs and infusions and bitters and amari and base spirits, etc., that finding somebody to scale up 1 or 2 recipes and put them into a bottle is that should be pretty easy, right? And turns out I was wrong, and but thank goodness I didn't know how difficult, or how not even difficult, just how tenuous it would be, and how intricate and obnoxious it could be. So if I'd known that, I might have picked something easier. But I decided to launch Rocky's back in 2016, and I started working on it in earnest in 2017. It took 2 years almost exactly to bring it off the ground, which for me felt like an eternity. And in speaking with people who have launched brands, they're like, actually, that's not bad at all. That's pretty quick, which I thought was really interesting. So having Rocky's on market now for 3 years has been an incredible experience. I'm very proud of where it is and excited to see where it goes. Fundamentally, it's a liqueur. It's a delicious cocktail modifier. People who have a bit of a sweet tooth, folks who might drink, Blanc Vermouth or Lillet or Coquille Americano, things of that nature. People who drink that on the rocks, those on the rocks would really enjoy, and do really enjoy, drinking Rocky's on ice as well. But I think usually you see it mixed with something else, and that something else is really in the consumer's hand. I make it in New York from a blend of green apple, pineapple, green and black tea, lemon, lime, and orange. I intentionally picked 12% alcohol because I wanted it to be firmly in a moderate category as far as alcohol is concerned. That if somebody wanted to mix it with wine or sparkling wine, Prosecco, bubbles, seltzer, anything of that kind, or sherry, something on the low to moderate end, then Rocky's is not going to be what puts it over the edge in terms of ABV. But if you want to have a more spirit-forward cocktail, there are plenty of options to get you there too. So it was an intentional decision to be at that place. I've done a lot of work in the no and low ABV space. And so far it's really gone very well. That was one of the calculated risks, right? There's not a lot of liqueurs, not a lot of spirits in general that are at 12% or in that sort of like 11 to 16%. Usually see wine in that category, but it's paid off. It's working really well.
Hey, Rocky, can I ask you a question about that? I'm sorry. So I'm just obsessed with that kind of moment where you were looking ahead and thought, I want to be in this space. In 2017, you were thinking that. And now I think we're still at the beginning of what it's about to do, no and low. But I think because we all accept that it's about to do something, whether it's going to become the equivalent of, like liquid veganism, we don't know, but like it's established. How did you not know that might not work out? Because it did work out. It's not in small part because people with your mindset were looking to push it forward. But can you just talk more about that? I'm really curious.
Yeah, of course. And keep throwing double negatives at me. Don't throw me off my. Well, okay. So, as Lane mentioned, my first job was at 11 Madison Park in the city, in New York City. I shouldn't say the city. I got to play around with a lot of sort of food pairing beverages, and usually we opted for things that were moderate in alcohol, and a lot of times with no alcohol, right? So we put together some really, really, really fun no and low alcohol cocktails that were intended to accompany the food, and that, as a cook in my background, really got my juices flowing, if you will. And then at every subsequent place I opened, I opened a small cocktail bar called Compose that we later evolved into what is now Atera, and it's still doing well. I opened Aska. It was the first restaurant I had ownership stake in Brooklyn, and really got to sink my teeth into that. my colleague Shiraz Noor at the time, who was the GM of Aska, he and I really, we were on the same wavelength in terms of developing no and low alcohol accompaniments for food and also standalone beverages. And my last spot was called Betony on 57th Street between 5th and 6th, right in the heart of Midtown. And that team and that concept, that restaurant was big enough. You know, we had about 130 seats, all things considered, and a big bar, a big lounge that was raucous and fun and loud, and people had a great time walking in and out. No reservations needed. We never turned anybody away. It was virtually unheard of that you couldn't find a way to have fun with us, right? The dining room, you know, if the dining room's booked, the dining room's booked, but you had a place in the restaurant no matter what, right? So it was just, I think, a really fun, really high quality watering hole and restaurant in Manhattan, right? And at that place, because we had, again, the capacity to be able to have a team that was dynamic with a lot of different people, we flushed out our beverage program in a really fun and cool way. Non-alcoholic cocktails were a big part of that menu. And, you know, as an example, there's an interesting, I think it's fun, beverage that we created called the Beet Wine, which I feel has been replicated by a few folks. I've seen it since, which is neat. But the idea was to create a non-alcoholic beverage that would do the job of a wine. And, you know, when I was working at 11 Madison Park, the team there, you know, the non-alcoholic default, a lot of times if somebody was trying to fit in with their wine drinking crowd, was just grape juice. We bought like really expensive varietal specific grape juice, and we served it in a wine glass, and it was tasty, but it was so sweet. And it literally was just like Pinot Noir juice, you know, Riesling juice, right? And I thought, you know, this is sexy and cool and tasty, like objectively, but just not a very intelligent accompaniment for really good food, right? Like, who wants to drink a glass of Welch's with your steak? Like, it just doesn't make sense. So I thought to myself, how do we create an appropriate accompaniment that's dry, right? So, and what does a wine have? Fundamentally, what does a wine have? It has earth and fruit and acid and tannin, right? So how do I have those four things in a non-alcoholic beverage that does the job of a wine to accompany something serious, a delicious roast chicken or something like that, right? So I thought, you know, let's go beets. They have a little bit of sweetness, but they have way more earth and a fair amount of like just fruit. You know, I know it's not a fruit, but like the flavor of a beet has that fruitiness, right? And then
there's a reason they make sugar out of it,
right?
Yeah, you know, like.
Yeah. And then, you know, we did a really, really strong steep of Taiguanyan oolong tea, like really over steeped. And that gives you that sort of minerality and a lot of tannin, right? A lot of tannin, because I'm not barrel aging this stuff, right? So the tannin's got to come from somewhere. It's not coming from grape skins. It's not coming from barrel. So let's go tea, right? And then Granny Smith apple juice, which has a lot of acidity and a bit of fruit too, and that sort of bright, fresh malic minerality. And that's important because grapes and apples have a tremendous amount of malic acid. And whenever you drink a glass of good wine, there should be that mouth-watering, delicious, juicy quality, right?
You're making me thirsty, Eamon.
Totally. Without necessarily being sweet. So the right proportions of those three ingredients that were allowed to rest, and all three of them also conveniently, very naturally clarify. They settle. So you take that combination of ingredients in the right proportions, you put it into a wine bottle, you pour it into a wine glass, and it's not a wine. Nobody thought, oh my God, I can't tell the difference between this and a glass of, you know, Burgundy or whatever, right? But when you drink it, it's like, this does the job. You know, it does the job. And all this is to say, my ramble, all this is to say that I developed a really strong appreciation for no and low alcohol beverages for years and years and years and years. It's been a while since we've done something actively together, you know, the pandemic considered, but I'm the cocktail director for Listen Bar, a really, really cool project that showcases all alcohol-free beverages of quality. We have delicious alcohol-free beers and cocktails alike. It's really fun, and developing that project over the course of the last several years, and seeing it really flourish with music considered, et cetera. It's worth also saying that, you know, the ethos of the bar and of the people I feel confident saying is not to avoid intoxication. It's to avoid alcoholic intoxication. So, run with that whichever direction you wish. But, the idea is not to avoid mind-altering substances or to avoid, CBD or even THC stuff. It's to say, alcohol is not the healthiest way to intoxicate yourself. In some ways, some may say, and I'm an avid drinker, no problem whatsoever. But I think that there is a market, an emerging market, and I would say one that has already emerged that doesn't necessarily lean on alcohol as a way to enjoy life or enhance life, right? And there are a lot of other options. So developing that menu, seeing it really flourish, having such a strong appreciation for no and low alcoholic beverages in past. It was a major factor, major influence in developing Rockies into what is now 12% alcohol liqueur that it is.
I love that. We got there in the end, but I didn't know all those things. I had no idea you did all those different projects. And I remember the EMP no alcohol because it was a pairing menu, which
Yep.
was quite fascinating. But we're getting far off topic, so I'm going to go dive us back in. Even though I could sit, I want to talk about that. That's a further conversation over a drink.
Totally.
That I
Easy drink,
that
alcohol drink.
Exactly, with alcohol in it. But I do want to get back to one thing about Rockies, because I think people, why did it take 2 years? Which is short,
Yeah.
right? So, but what do people don't know? Why does it take that long?
Sure. Well, so I think it's important maybe to put a little asterisk on it to say that if I were to produce, or when I produce another flavor or another format, another size, iteration of Rockies, then that won't take 2 years, right? Having the bottle, the label, the formula for the original bottle, to be able to do a spiced iteration, which is something I'm really looking forward to doing. That will be the next one. You heard it now. You heard it for the first time on the Beverage BA Academy cast. So no, I've already formulated a delicious spiced iteration of Rockies that I do look forward to introducing at some point in the not too distant future. I'm not in a rush, but that's not going to take 2 years. But starting a spirit from scratch, it's going to take a while. It takes longer than you think. And some of the things you do, you have to file for your LLC or whatever corporate organization you're going to utilize. You have to file for that. I strongly recommend finding a good compliance attorney, Ryan Malkin. Just giving him a plug. He's spectacular and works with everybody, and he's very reasonable and highly collaborative. If you're looking to bring in external capital, from friends, family, or corporations, then you have to find a contract attorney too. That takes time and ironing out all that stuff. So that's just getting your company set up. Then you have to start thinking about, what's in the bottle. And Jackson, I feel like this will probably tickle your fancy, but I said to myself, I've been a beverage manager. I've been a general manager. I've been an owner operator. I know what it means to buy something, to utilize it, hopefully in a profitable manner, and to sell it. Right. I know what that's like. I know what it means to turn inventory over, to manage an inventory, and to see my product either well utilized or poorly utilized, and what impact that can have on my bottom line. So I said to myself, I want to make sure that when somebody buys a bottle of Rockies for a restaurant or bar, specifically a restaurant or bar, that it has to be able to be poured in a full 2-ounce pour profitably. And if not, it's not going to do well. It's not going to work, right? I know that I could sell something in a liquor store and charge a few extra bucks for it. And as long as it's well packaged and well marketed and it tastes delicious, the off-premise is going to buy it. If there's anything, to learn for the last, 10 years or whatever, people buying Casamigos and other big brand tequila at very high prices, or even other liqueurs, you look at the price of Campari, Bailey's, etc. These are ingredients that are not cheap. And a bar can afford to use Campari as a modifier at 1/2 ounce, 3/4 ounce, etc. But pouring 2 ounces of Campari is not an affordable thing to do as a base spirit, right? So I said to myself, I want to be able to be poured as a base spirit or a co-base in a cocktail with gin or tequila or whatever. So I literally started with a very simple spreadsheet that I built out, and instead of beginning at column 1, right, or column A rather, I started at like G or whatever it was, right? Way down the line, way down the alphabet. And I started with the price that I felt would put it in a acceptable margin that a bar owner would be able to buy a bottle of Rockies, use 2 ounces of it, charge $13 for it in a cocktail, and make a really solid margin. And I just worked backward. I worked backward to my closure, to my label, to my glass, to the liquid, to the box, to the divider in the box, like literally to the very, very granular expenses that would go into producing Rockies. And it was deductive. And I don't feel like that's the way that most spirits are produced, nor is it the way that most spirits should be produced. You know, if I was,
But I have heard that, you know, people talking about this, you know, that at least your goal is, if you want to be using a cocktail, you should be looking at something that it should be under $1 an ounce, like in the, if you want something to be in the well. Jackson, I do, I mean, I'm assuming your program would vary of like what was used, but, you know, under $1 an ounce seems about,
Something's got, otherwise something has to give, you know?
Right.
There's a lot of, we should get into all the different ways that, you know, support can overcome like
Yes.
the general category. But first, I just want to say, Rocky, to me, like, yeah, there's passion in the way you did that. And, you know, like you could, you know, there's also, there's passion in like, this is the way my ancestors made this liqueur and this is the way I make it. And I can't wait to bring it to the market. And like, that's an easy story to tell. 7
Sure.
generations of Alpine apricots, you know, like, there's passion in the Saint Germain story of, hey, this elderflower ingredient really works for everybody. And there isn't a liqueur, you know, like, so I'm gonna figure out how to do this, and it's gonna look like an ancient thing, but it's brand new, you know.
Yeah.
But it's here for that emerging bar culture at the time, and
Right.
that's kind of, you're sort of like operating in that space when you say like, my passion is that this be used as on the full gamut of what the bar is, from no to low to, you know, from low to classics, you know.
Versatility.
So I better start where it can be used that way. You know, like, so
Absolutely.
That's
no, I think that's a great pickup there, Jackson. You did start from that.
More than deductive.
Yeah, exactly. You know? More than deductive. And I do want to tap into, because if we're going to go in there, and Jackson, you did bring it up briefly about, you know, what you could as a brand ambassador, because sometimes this is a problem that a lot of brand ambassadors face. They go in, they are not $1 an ounce, they're more than that. And it's like, how do they have that conversation with a bar owner? Because they didn't have somebody like Eamon Rockey, who came in and produced something at a very specific price, with that in mind. And they come to your bar and they're like, hey, I have this product, I really want to get on the menu, which I would love to talk about that, like why you choose to use certain brands and when you choose to use names or not names, and what's the benefit of that. But also just, what can they do? It's like, I come to you and I'm like, Jackson, I have this product, and it's, you know, it's going to be at least $1.50, maybe $2 an ounce, but I want to get on your menu. Is it just having a more expensive cocktail on the menu, you know, which I know some people do, like to have 2 or 3 like signature drinks? Like, where is the fit for that brand who's not under $1 an ounce, but is a cocktail ingredient that is the Camparis or the more expensive tequilas, things of that nature?
Well, kind of, Rocky sort of hit on the reverse part of that equation when he said, I want my product to be able to co-base and help your bottom line, right? So if your product isn't going to help the bottom line as a co-base, how about it co-bases so well with something that will help the bottom line? For instance, you have a obscure category of one, you know, liqueur that you're bringing in from, you know, Mastica or something like that, you know, like, and it's got to be made a certain way, it's got to be at a certain price. It's mind blowing, but you're like, if I start slinging this around 2 ounces of pour, like, you know, where, and then you're told by the person who's made this, hey, this goes really well with tequila, and I know that you have a reasonably priced tequila as part of your full ramp up, you know, like, so an ounce and an ounce there. So it's sort of the reverse of saying like, hey, let me in as the co-base to help your bottom line, but you can come with the information to help make somebody bring something else in as a cost-effective drink. So if your product is a little bit on the more expensive side, I would say do a lot of rigorous work at presentations of it that are mitigated. Have some serves in mind, is the parlance, the industry parlance, of how this works in portions that make sense to a bottom line. Now that's sort of like what I would say to somebody small who's finding themselves outside that envelope that Rocky was describing, right? Bigger brands have portfolio cash support where they can overcome that in other ways. With it's different, thanks to the way we repealed prohibition, it's different in every state in our country about how they can give you money to offset that.
Yes.
But smaller brands will have a harder time with that because they'll go market to market and their whole operation is running a lot tighter. But they can bring you information, and they can bring you had asked me earlier, sort of like, this dichotomy of like big brand to small brand, and how do you choose? And there's probably kind of like an 80-20 equation in there where it's like, 80% of establishments should be doing business both with large and small, right? There might be some very fringe concepts that are so small and so macro that they can get away with just a small number of big brands, in a stadium or something. And there's probably a very small number of places that can be completely exclusive from that and only work with the smallest producers, right? But most of us, we're going to spend some time balancing between meeting the consumer where they are when they come in, and then teasing them into this other stuff that we're really into. And so to run big, credible, broad-based programs in this day and age, I think you have to be working with both of them. And I think that's why it's important that we're talking about kind of splitting it into sort of like, hey, small brand walks into a bar, like what should your expectations be as the buyer? We need to elevate. I think we need to elevate on our side of the equation. I feel like it shouldn't all be on the brand ambassador. And I've spent a lot of time learning from people who brought me really shitty products that they didn't understand very well. Excuse my language.
It's okay.
But I've always tried to show them respect for the fact that they're teaching me in that moment. And the respect I can show is to try the juice, reflect on the reasons that it may not work for me, and in a polite way, like be very honest. Hey, this is a cost of goods issue. Hey, this liquid's not quite right for me. Hey, there's this other thing in the market that I've been rolling with for a long time, and displacing it is going to cause a discomfort that I don't know how we overcome, and so I think on the buying side, and I don't know how, as the brand ambassador, you help educate the buyer. I really don't, but we all need to kind of work to sort of raise the level of discourse there. So it's not like, one way is young brand ambassador that walks into a bar at 4 p.m. and says, hey, how do I get on your menu? It's like, by not walking in and shouting that at 4 p.m. probably is a good start,
Yes.
But
No,
I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that, So.
No, I was gonna say, but okay, so the balance of, and Rocky, I would love to hear your thoughts as well, because there is that balance, right? So you're a small brand, you're going in, you have something that's unique, not nobody else has the product that you have. So there's a lot of education. You don't have the big budgets to spend, but so how do you approach a bar? And Jackson, I'd love to hear your thoughts like about Rocky's approach. Like, is there, not I'm sure you'll say it's great, but like, how do you mitigate that? The fact that like, hey, I'm not going to buy you a new frozen drink machine. All I have is me. I have my education. I have my product. What do you do, Rocky, for yourself when you're going into a bar, you're approaching them and you're saying, I have this product. They don't know how to use it. What are the steps that you take to approach a bar, to somebody like Jackson, to have them take in your product?
Well, I mean, I think the first thing I do is I go visit the bar, ideally when they're rocking, or at least open and serving drinks, and you get a feel for what they do well, and maybe some opportunities that you have the ability to help them grow, and fill out a need. There are a lot of people who own and operate bars that make tasty drinks that don't necessarily have the full spectrum of cocktail knowledge and background. You know, they're great hosts, they're great leaders, they're maybe good business people. Maybe they have a lot of money, but they don't have they don't have the full spectrum of the skill set of a beverage director, a beverage manager, right? So to be able to say, hey, look, you have this great opportunity. If you did a large format sangria or punch or something, you know, you have a lot of big groups here. It would alleviate a lot of the stress that your servers and your bartenders are feeling. Let me help you put together something like that that will be beneficial to you. And, you know, the frozen drink program is another good example. You know, I don't have the ability to buy frozen cocktail machines for everybody, but man, frozen cocktails and espresso martinis for some reason have really taken off again over the course of the last 3 to 5 years. And I think it's great. Although I can't buy everybody frozen drink machines or espresso machines for that matter. I do have relationships with brands that can. So if I rally a bunch of brands that are able to help to support an account to put in a frozen drink machine, then I'm the architect for the cocktails, then I'm bringing something to the account that they need, right? Draft cocktails, same thing. A lot of bars right now, because it's trendy, it's consistent, there's very little, if any, waste, and they're delicious. A lot of bars are trying to figure out how to put draft cocktails on instead of another IPA or whatever, right? And so wanting to do it is one thing, knowing how to do it is another. It's not rocket science, but you still are benefited by having done it once or twice and knowing what you're doing and sort of knowing what not to do too. There are things that, you know, can sort of set a draft cocktail program in the wrong direction, and some things they'll set in the right direction. So being able to go into the bar like I do frequently and say, look, you have 10 draft lines, you're using 5. Why don't we throw a draft cocktail on the menu? It'll be awesome. And then, you know, use some Rockies in it, right? It's an easy proposition with a very low threshold of risk, and a very high.
Do you spend time with them to then teach them how to do it? Like, hey, do you know how to do this? If you don't, like, this is my expertise.
Yeah.
Can I help you?
Absolutely. I mean, if they let me spend time with them, for sure. If they're nice
Gotcha.
people.
Does anybody ever let you do that? Because I've offered this as advice about, like, there's a lot of bars out there right now who are short staffed, who has brought up a new team of staff that are not as experienced. It's almost like we're going back in time again, where there's so many bartenders who need to be educated again, because all the A team is gone. And now the B and C team are now at the front, and they're craving education.
Sure.
So advice I've given some of my brand ambassadors that I mentor is, you know, you have this knowledge, go in. Obviously, you're not going to talk to a Jackson who knows how to do this, but there's a lot of accounts out there. I'm like, hey, you know, it does take time, so you have to make sure it's the right count, but
sure,
offering that service. But I don't know. That's me saying it. I don't know if people accept it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, sometimes they don't. And in the accounts that the buyer is very confident and or very knowledgeable, those two things don't always accompany each other. You know, you have to be deferent. And in those instances, it's like, what can I offer you? What do you want? What do you need? Or just like, hey, man, or hey, miss, like, let's have a beer sometime and let's spend some time together and get to know each other as professionals, if that's a possibility, right? And if in the instance that, you know, there is a need, identifying it and volunteering to be a part of that and contribute, it's great. And I think it's also worth saying, you know, somebody having done something for a very long time does not necessarily mean that they're the greatest and most proficient cocktail person. Like I've put together draft programs and you know, immersion circulator programs and whatever, like carbonation programs for operators that have been around for a long time and are extremely good at what they do. But it doesn't necessarily mean that they've done one of those things before or any of those things before. So, you know,
no, agreed. That's what I was going to say. And so, Jackson, would you? I mean, you have a big expertise, but you might be missing a gap. You know, might have a gap in your knowledge. Would you be open to somebody if there was a brand ambassador? It's like, this is my expertise. Do you want my help?
Absolutely. One of the big brands, the local team here during the pandemic, brought in a small canning apparatus and went bar to bar. They didn't give it to you and show you how to use it. The whole team came to your closed bar that was doing to-go drinks and like scheduled it with you. We'll come on Thursday between 10 and 1. We'll help you batch. We'll help you can. You can put them in the fridge. You can sell them to go all week, and then we're going to leave. You know, like, I mean, that was a level of
That's amazing.
outside, you know, outside the box thinking that was really, really helpful. And, you know, for me, again, like a lot of the technical stuff, you know, especially if it's new, you know, I can use Google, and I have a great Rolodex, if you want to call it an iPhone that. I can call people and ask them, like, hey, I need to make an Instagrammable drink today. Like, what's happening? How do I do this? Whatever it is. But that doesn't mean that I don't take myself as an expert on the product. And, you know, for a long time, there was a big disconnect between like kind of craft and macro, and the recipes that somebody would give me with a new tequila in 2008 were not good. They were pinned into the weirdness of decades past with poorly chosen modifiers. And, you know, now when somebody brings in a small product and I ask them, like, how's best to use this, they usually give me 5 serves that are all great, you know. So I'm actually hungry for that all the time. And I've doubled back on brands that have had a long relationship with me and think he knows what to do with this, with brand X, you know. I've doubled back in the sense that, my God, what are your initiatives this year, you know? And the reason I want to know that is kind of like multi-layered, right? That's going to, I want the relationship to be good. It's going to make them happy if I'm hitting the notes that they're trying to hit. But how did they come up with that programming, right? They came up with that programming because they see a trend and they're investing in meeting the consumer at the rum tonic or at the this, that, you know, like whatever it is. And so if I know what they're trying to get across, like I can have an inkling, you know, they may or may not be successful with that in a large sense, but if I know where they're going, they have a lot more research, especially if it's a larger brand, they have a lot more research on where people are than I do. I have a smaller sample than they have access to, right? So I've always wanted to incorporate that into at least like, hey, here's this new product on the bar, or here's this old product on the bar. Here's a new way to use it. Like, you know, briefing, maybe, you know, maybe that's things that make the menu, but maybe the service is so simple it doesn't make the menu, but it's something that we're cognizant of and we talk about. And when we see somebody ask for it, we're ready for it. And those were like the, you know, the kind of, as the Aperol Spritz caught fire, and there were a whole bunch of other kind of spritz-like drinks around it, right? Like having the brands help tell you proportions, or large brands had glassware that helped pour those kinds of drinks. Like having them talk about that and bring that to the table, like, is helpful to an operator of any level of experience, because it does help you anticipate sort of where a certain segment of the public might be.
No, that's good to know, because I know a lot of brand ambassadors are a little gun shy. They're like, well, I don't want to tell them. They probably already know. And I'm sure there's a way of doing it in a way like, hey, I had this research. Would you like to hear it? Because I'm sure there are some operators who don't care, who just business, who don't want to know, you know, like, yeah, I got my business solid. You don't need to be explaining this to me. But then there are others like yourself is like, hey, I'm open to learning something new. I want to hear this information. So as a brand ambassador, having that knowledge and then feeling it out, I would think, to be finding out, is it a buyer like yourself, Jackson, who is open to this information? I mean, Rockey, I'm sure you've had this experience with some of the buyers you've met where some are looking for new information and some are not. So, you know, how do you get to know the buyer? Like, you were a buyer, so now do you have a mindset of how you get to know them so you can figure out, like, besides going into their bar and researching where they are at, but when you're sitting and having that conversation of feeling out like, okay, like this person is open to me having this conversation, and then how do you build that kind of relationship with them?
Well, I feel like
some of your tactics.
Karma is really coming back to me, because when I was a buyer, I was generally the not pleasant kind. And at the time I felt, you know, sort of, I don't know, very confident and almost dismissive of reps. I didn't understand that they are really often working hard. They're at the beck and call of a lot of very influential accounts that they work with. And, you know, I know this now. My day gets turned upside down by folks that I'm trying to meet with, and it can be it is a really challenging job to go to 4, 5, 6, 7, 10 different accounts every day and try to develop a relationship, provide a different service to each one, all in the interest of selling your product so that you can pay your bills and survive and make more product and be successful and employ people, right? Provide a livelihood for yourself and others. So I sincerely believe that the universe is getting back at me a little bit for not necessarily being as appreciative of the position of salespeople and reps, and whether they're working for a brand or a distributor or whatever. It's something that's really challenging, and there are dream accounts, that they want to meet with you, they want to chit chat, and if you have an idea, they're all ears. There are others that are just excited to hang out, but they're not looking for your insight and advice, and you have to be able to parse the difference between the two. There are others that they want you to come and buy drinks, spend money, and hang out, but they don't really want to talk. It's not really important to them. And then there are ones that are just like, get out. So, I mean, it's everything, and it's always interesting. There's never a dull day, that's for sure.
Hey,
You told me yesterday, Jackson.
I'm so sorry. Rockey, have you found, like, especially in that no and low conversation, I'm sure, again, that's run the gamut of like all the experiences you just described, but the get out is not really what I'm interested in. Where's been have there been those times that, like, you've seen that people are kind of hungry for that, maybe not so good at that, and that you've been able to kind of like help define that category for them?
Making a low alcohol cocktail?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, making a low alcohol cocktail with my particular spirit, and this is not limited to mine, but when you have something that's only 12%, throw in something sparkling on top and adding a delicious herb or infusion or syrup or whatever, it's really easy, right?
Have you had some accounts though that just like they wouldn't have thought of that until they sat down with you, and then they come away with a better understanding of your product and the category?
Maybe, but I'll tell you what I've heard countless times, legitimately countless times, including I'm in Atlanta right now. I know the mountains. You don't realize Atlanta has these mountains. It's crazy until you get here. But I'm in Atlanta right now and visiting with all sorts of really cool people. This is such a beautiful place. It's amazing. The community here is incredible. But I sat down with some folks last night before last, at this beautiful spot called Miller Union. If you haven't been, if you're in Atlanta, you must go, amongst dozens of places that are also really exceptional. And I sat down, chatted with the team, poured them some Rockies. They tasted, and they're like, oh, this is super yummy. This is really delicious. How much alcohol? Oh, 12%. That's so cool. We were actually looking at doing a spritz that uses a little bit of pisco and strawberry, but actually mostly sparkling wine, using pisco as an accent, keeping the alcohol really low and benefiting from the grape distillate of the pisco with the obviously grape sparkling wine, and using other things to accent and enhance those. And they were like, Rockies is perfect, right? And so right away, they were like, we have been looking for something that does this job. And I swear to you, it happens all the time. Where people are like, oh man, we've been working on a spritz. We've been looking for something that would be able to produce a low alcohol or moderate alcohol cocktail in our menu. We're looking for something to be able to do a job that we already have in mind. We just didn't know what that thing was going to be. We're looking for that missing link, and Rockies ends up being that missing link, and it happens all the time.
So Jackson, now for your new menu coming up, for your new program, it's got to be very
need all the help I can get.
We'll talk.
A low ABV cocktail. Well, guys, we've been talking for a bit, so I didn't get to a lot of my questions, but I love getting to know you guys and hearing some, like, a lot of different perspectives on things we didn't even get a chance to talk to the other day, which is fantastic. So I want to talk about, before we're wrapping this thing up, is a few things. So, and I'm looking at my list because I forgot there was a mind set and then it went out the window. So there you go. So let's talk about two more things before we wrap it up. One, let's talk about the fact that, we talked about it a little bit, like cocktail menus, right? So cocktail menus are, a thing that every brand ambassador, every brand owner wants to do. And Jackson, I thought you had an interesting perspective on this, is that, you know, you chose originally to not put brands on, and then you realize that maybe you should put brands on. So why would you choose not to put on a brand, and what is the benefit? What have you seen the benefit on either side of why you would put brands on and why you wouldn't?
And first, let me say I stand by both those decisions. I was against putting names of brands on before I was for putting names of brands on, right? In 2005, we were practicing a lot of heavy dislodgement, which is this hospitality concept of saying yes by other means, right? Never using the word that other people use to mean the opposite of yes, but not having particular brands present, right? And it was in Boston in 2005. You may think 100 years ago in this conversation is kind of where you found yourself. Like, what do you mean you don't have brand X? What do you mean you don't have brand Y? Wait, are you trying to say you don't have brand Z? Like, it was war, you know? And I did it to get people off of asking for vodka drinks because I wanted them to try some classic cocktails. And there was an evangelical aspect to this. We were doing it at scale. It was a killing floor out there, like some of, you know, but there was like, I don't see the teenies on this menu was not uttered once. It was uttered dozens of times in that environment, right? And so I went as far as even like to disguise gin, I would say the Spirit of Plymouth and lemon juice. And the only brands that lived on those early menus were like Benedictine or yellow chartreuse, like highly distinctive, one of a kind Peychaud's. It's all over that menu, but it was with vodka or whiskey or rum or gin, and sometimes avoiding the word gin to try and get people to try it, right? So we all did that, you know, like we changed that landscape, and at a certain point, you know, it became a little bit of like, you know, I was hiding vodka from craft cocktail people who wanted a drink that didn't have vodka in it, right? And I had some highballs that really presented like gin with a little chartreuse and cranberry bitters and soda and lime and vodka as the base. And I would serve that to people who never thought they would enjoy a vodka drink, right? So the screw had kind of turned at that point, and I just kind of I had used all the space under the cocktail to use more action words and historical context and flowery things, and it just became like a balance between, hey, if you want to make a subtext statement, if you have the room, do it, and then just list out some of the ingredients, list them out, say exactly what they are. If it's shifting, you can use the word vodka. If it's going to be different things depending on the moment, or you can use the brand name, because it really helps the brands come be your partner. You're proud of the brands that you've chosen to stock. So what's the thing? So I hid it all for a reason, to create conversations, to break down barriers, to create loyalty to the bar, that it could make a great drink and get you in the right cocktail, and practice bartender's choice and all these other things that we were doing. And when we had kind of done that work for enough people, I was like, let's let the menu do that now. Now that people are more comfortable at kind of like and trusting of menus in a way that they just were not in my market in 2005, 6, and 7. So
you're saying, and I love that, and the benefit of it, because there's still bars that choose not to do it, right? They just have vodka, gin, tequila, you know, because they want to stay a little, you know, obscure, and they don't want to seem like they're in bed with anybody. But there's a benefit to it, and this is a frustration of brand ambassadors, probably a frustration of brand owners sometimes, is, you know, to have your name on the menu. It goes a long way with your financiers and with your boss, you know, the people. You have KPIs, key performance indicators, that have to mark it off.
I'm not going through the karmic retribution that Rocky is personally
I don't
suffering,
want you to do that.
but I am engaged in atonement. I am engaged in atonement for my sins against brand ambassadors. You know, like at a certain point, I realized I don't know if the sleeping with analogy is but I'm proud of who I'm in bed with. You know, like I'm proud of who I'm doing business with. I'm proud of every choice we've made. And so why the fuck am I going to damage this relationship by being rude to a person whose livelihood depends on our ability to communicate these choices together. And that came after kind of realizing that the first calibration was sort of moving off that hard stance of making the menu hard to understand to get you to talk to me, right? I had moved off of that stage before I really started to realize the power of highlighting those relationships.
Right.
So
no, that makes a lot of sense. So as a brand, if I was coming to you as a brand ambassador and you happen to be one of those owners who is like, yeah, we don't put menus names on the menu, is there any way of talking that person off the shelf, or it's just like, it's not worth the argument? Fine, as long as you put my brand, you start buying it. I see the case of orders coming in. I guess that's fine. Or
I remember people starting to say to other accounts in my market that I was doing it. That was so I like, that's a rather desperate play, to be like, well, Bar Y is doing it, like, I don't know if that's going to work at an account that still at this point has made this a pride position. Rocky, do you have any? I know your brand is its own thing, but have you successfully navigated that reticence with anyone?
Sure. I mean, first of all, generally speaking, in past, none of the bars I owned or operated had spirit names on the menu, generally speaking, unless the spirit was so eponymous in its category that we had to, right? So Campari is Campari is Campari. I'm not going to say bitter Italian aperitif liqueur. That'd be dumb, right? You could, but that's dumb. So, Rocky's kind of falls into that liqueur category, that it's its own thing, right? You wouldn't say, American apple, pineapple, citrus, and tea liqueur. That would again be dumb, right? So I've been fortunate to dodge that issue pretty easily, or naturally, I should say. But I respect when bars decide not to put spirit brand names on the menu, generally speaking, and I recognize that my position is unique. But that was the position I took generally, and I said to myself, I don't want to be beholden to any particular spirit. That was my position in past as a buyer. Now, as a brand ambassador and working very closely with a lot of other brands, I have a different perspective on it, and I see again the livelihood of these people depending in many cases on being able to get the word out about their brands, and my tune has changed, right? So if I were to open another bar, I would certainly list the spirits that I'm proud to work with on the menu. But I don't fault those who choose not to. They just need to see the different perspective, right? As I now see a different perspective. So if there is a strategy to get an emerging brand's name on the menu at a place that typically hasn't or doesn't, then I would just say empathy is the best way to go about it. Find an opportunity. First of all, develop the relationship with them independently of the conversation. Develop the relationship first. And then, in the context of that relationship, that mutually beneficial, collaborative relationship, which takes time and energy and often money and resources, right? You spend time with the decision maker and you say, look, I'm not asking this out of ego. I'm asking this because I want us to have the longest, most fruitful, positive relationship possible. This is why I am asking, because I don't get paid. I don't get a paycheck unless it says my brand on your menu. And that is the case with a lot of brands. Whether or not that's common knowledge, it's absolutely true. They're not looking for depletions through a bar and restaurant. They're looking for people to get the word out about their brand so that other people, so the consumer will go to, the wine and spirit shop around the corner and pick up a bottle for their home bar, because that's really where you see stability and sustainability in a spirit, right? So being able to sit down with the decision maker and saying, this is not about, bragging rights. This is about livelihood and about, being able to survive. And I think there are a lot of people that I think would not necessarily be empathetic to that, but the right ones I think will, and they'll find a way to be able to showcase it and to, I would say, quote unquote, do the right thing. Because I do think it's the right thing to do, to support people you work with.
Yeah, I think so too. And Jackson, I think you realize that as well. It does build better partners, and it does help people. So it's like, I'm not trying to be a jerk. I have to show my boss something, and like, I need to know. That was my point, Jackson. The only time sometimes I'd have to show them, like, well, it's not on the menu, but see that it says tequila. Like, and
That's
then look at their case orders. Like
Yeah,
that's
that
the equivalent
tequila
of that.
is like most of the time it's us, and it's like
Yeah.
most of the time it's us split with another one.
Yeah.
Awesome. You know?
Yeah, exactly. I'm pretty sure that's mine because they are going through cases of it. So we're gonna go with yes. That's the one that they are using. So you guys, have both been in this industry for numerous years, and you have grown as people, as I can tell. Just having our conversations, you guys have shared a lot of things with me, of things that you've changed your tune to. So I end all the shows with giving some advice, but also I would love you to share like two things. So one, maybe one or two major lessons that we haven't touched on the show just yet that you have learned over your course of time, maybe as an owner or maybe as a bar director, and then what advice you would give brand ambassadors coming into this industry now, or working in this industry right now, who are in a different time, right? We're in the COVID time, right? So we're coming out of it, hopefully, who are looking to become brand ambassadors, about what they should know from your different perspectives and what you know about the job and what you know about dealing with them. So Rocky, I'll start with you because you expressed to me yesterday, but you've grown a lot.
sure. Cool. So I think be kind and be generous with the resources you have that are of value to other people. That would be the summation. And, with I'll keep it short, but the longer explanation of, I come from a high pressure environment in terms of training and family and whatnot, and empathy, kindness, positive motivation, positive feedback, and positive criticism are not always things that come naturally to me. I'm more of like a, stay in line. We're going to work hard. We're going to focus. We're going to get this job done, and don't mess this up, right? And so I've had to consciously train myself to see things from other people's perspectives and to really, truly, genuinely appreciate the value that other people bring to my life and my career, right? So I think being kind is number one, and I struggle with it every day to see things from other people's perspectives and not just my own. And I fully and freely admit that it's something that's really, really, really important to me. And in terms of providing people resources that you have and being generous with them, I don't have a whole lot of money behind Rockies. I'm funding this almost entirely myself. I don't have a big brand behind me or a lot of investors, but what I do have is 15 or 16 years working in the industry and probably making most of the mistakes that somebody could make or will make in their career, right? In terms of inventory and hiring and management and design and all the things, like soup to nuts, right? So I have something that is of value, right, to bartenders, bar managers, et cetera, operators, and I feel a great debt of gratitude to be able to share this with people and to provide a service and to give people something that is of value beyond just money. And man, it would be really great to have more of that, but I don't have any of it right now. Right. So to be able to give something that comes from working in the industry and messing things up and passing that along, it's a great thing. So those are my 2 points of advice.
Fair enough. Go for it.
Those are
Jackson?
so big pictures, so great for kind of both sides of the bar. I would say, I know we're talking to brand ambassadors. I keep wanting to make sure that I'm talking to bar managers a little bit too, that,
No, you definitely are. I think it's
they
both
heed
tuning
kind
in.
of Rocky's advice of that level of empathy and understand that this moment is a training opportunity that goes both ways, right? And I would say, for me, it was like when I realized that every product that was brought for me to taste was an opportunity for me to learn. I became very grateful, and through my gratefulness would tell people, I'm going to tell you exactly what my one opinion is. On the kind of the other side, the advice I would give to brand ambassadors, I had a distributor, a salesperson here who really kind of took the hard lessons of showing products to people to heart and really develop themselves. They sort of they kind of realized that I had this, that I love tasting stuff in the blind, because it's, and not everybody does, right? Some buyers are going to want to like maintain structure to these meetings that might not allow for. But to a young brand ambassador, what this distributor did is he offered, hey, I've got some stuff I'd love for you to try. I can leave you a bottle, or if you'd like, I could come by and taste you in the blind, because he knew I was trying to get more experiences doing that. And he would bring other products of his and put them side by side in the same category. And I get a chance to kind of evaluate them. And then there'd be the reveal. And I remember how exceptional the Playboy bottle of cachaça was. Just gorgeous juice that they bought and put in this ridiculous package, which I would have rejected for my bar on site alone. And then that won double gold at the Spirited Awards the same year.
Wow.
Like, they had bought some really great juice, right? And I would never have really had that opportunity if this person hadn't kind of like slowly over time developed this sort of approach. It was like, hey, if you want to test in the blind, I got some stuff I'd love to show you if you have time. It was very much on my terms, but he figured out kind of what it was that made me tick and offered it to me and was willing to do it himself. He's like, now you want to taste me on something? And he sold a lot of products based on my addiction to learning with him. So I'd say look for that. Look for those opportunities where they are.
I love that because I've actually heard a brand ambassador say, I work with the rum, I work with Kapali rum, and I was asking her about her sales techniques, and she said, and we definitely have some good competition out there. There might be a little less expensive and things of that nature. And she says, sometimes I just happen to make 3 daiquiris, like we do 3 daiquiris with the 3 different, rums, and then we do a blind tasting and they have to pick which one it is. She's like, sometimes I win, sometimes I lose, but a lot of times I win. And she's like, so there's no loss for doing it. She's like, because they were going to say no anyway. You
kind of always win there. Like, at worst, you've won like some respect. You've put your, like, let's shake it and see. That relationship, that person may be on that brand for 2 years and maybe on another brand, but that relationship could be something that continues, because of just the bravery to do that is so refreshing. Exactly. Because, you need to be on brand when you're there, but at the same time, your brand is supposed to be kind of connecting with that. The act is connecting with that person. So things like that can make the whole thing feel more honest, be more honest.
I would think so, because it's like you're saying, I get it. I respect your choice, what product you want to use, but let's put your money where let's see how it works. Let's just do the comparison, and then
$100 on this. Let's go.
Exactly. Let's make a a bet and see where it goes, because and it is hard every time you guys approaching. I mean, Jackson, it sounds like, when you reopen Eastern Standard in 2023, you're going to be a lovely buyer to have to come by and say hi to. Now you've learned everybody tastes Jackson blind, and don't come in at 4, which is never good advice, and which is always good advice not to do that. And Rocky, you're out there. We didn't get a chance to talk about some of the things, but you've learned a lot over your years of being a buyer, and now you're on the other side. So buyers, anybody is tuning in, have empathy for the brand ambassadors and sales reps. I think that's something to take away, because that job is really hard. And I think most people have no idea how hard it is until they get to the other side. So gentlemen, thank you again for sharing your wisdom and your stories. We kind of weaved in and out, but I think we got there. We got everything across in the end. It's really been a pleasure catching up with both of you. And Jackson, I hope we see you sooner than later. I know, Rocky, I'll probably see you,
Let's all have a drink down at that bar that Brother Cleve's opening in New York soon together.
That sounds like a plan. I know it's happening next week. Exactly. What is it called? Do you know, Jackson?
I should, but I don't.
I don't know either.
I was trying to escape that reality. But
sorry. Southern
just
Texas,
Google Brother Cleve. There's only one.
That is very true. That is very true. But anyway, I'm going to let you guys escape. It is almost 12:30, but thank you guys so much. And I look forward to seeing both of you soon. So have a great rest of your Wednesday.
Thank you, Elaine. Great to meet you, Jackson.
Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Bye.
And then there were 2.
I'll drop you an email, Jackson.
Please do, Rocky.
I will. Catch you later, buddy.